Everyone, this is another episode of the Business of Education, where I try and find the smartest people in the room to help us grow and learn about the education space. Today's guest is Dr. Pamela M. Donnelly, um, who has spent a lifetime in education, over 20 years, has also wrote a #1 Amazon bestseller, focused on equitable education, and also helps foster kids through the education system as well. Dr. Pamela, how are you?
Hi, everything's good here. How's it going?
I'm good. I'm good. I was trying to select, some of the things that I wanted to highlight on your accomplishments, but the list is forever long. So I'm super excited to have a conversation with you. Uh, Most recently, though, you played a game in politics. What took you from education to politics?
Well, when Jason Palmer announced that he was going to be running for the Democratic ticket, he and I had known each other for a number of years through ed tech. So he reached out to me through LinkedIn and engaged me to do some consulting. And the consulting went very smoothly. We worked well together. That rolled into a full-time job offer where I became his director of communications.
Do you feel like your experience in education made that role easier? I feel like in education, you're constantly trying to tell a story or communicate, but with just a different audience. How do you feel like that experience played into what you're doing with Jason?
I think any communications expertise is relevant to other verticals. In my case, I had recently completed a doctoral degree. So the PhD was in global leadership and change, and I focused very much on equitable college access on the dissertation. So a lot of my focus in education has always had a little bit of a political tint or awareness, because the truth is so many kids are across this country in failing systems, both public and private, and they need policy to help change the way things are happening down at the grassroots level. So I do see both a top down and bottom up approach to the work I'm trying to do to try to, it's all about the kids. I'm just here to serve students.
I love that. We use top down, bottom up quite often when we're talking to educators in our space, and the way that we communicate with them is always constantly growing. Um, and what I learned, a mutual connection of us, Rita, was on the show just recently, and she talked on how important it is to be able to navigate the political atmosphere in order to make a difference in education. I thought that I was going to be able to stay apolitical my whole career because that's where we wanted to be. I wanted to help people on the right and people on the left and just help guide them into becoming better readers. But after a conversation with Rita, that's not so much the case. You do need to understand the uh, political overview. I know that education was important to yourself. It was important to Jason. You know, diving in this year's atmosphere, there's already a sitting democratic president. What was the need, or what was the desire to jump into that right now? I know I have my beliefs, but what was it for you guys?
Well, I can't speak for Jason, but my understanding is that his frustration with what he sees as outdated ways of approaching today's problem really pushed him forward. I think there's a feeling that a lot of us share that we're moving at lightning speed into this digital age that we have only begun to even skim the surface of fathoming. And to have leadership that is very knowledgeable and indeed in Jason's case fluent in those spaces is really important. So I think that for him was critical. For me, a lot of this had to do with my alignment in terms of my values with Jason's values. What he cares about are the things I care about. He cares about making sure that we are living in an equitable society, not just in education, but in all sectors. Whether that looks like his history of investing in women, his history of championing people of color, his background in really having, I think, a very broad awareness of what this American dream that we all talk about needs to be,
Mhm.
and what are the moving parts to get us from point A to point B, at least closer to that sort of vision or hope that we all carry with us.
No, I appreciate the way that you said that, and I didn't want to have a conversation about Jason by any mean, but I knew what Jason stood for, and I felt like if you're there championing Jason and supporting him, that your beliefs have to be in line with that in order to be passionately committed to doing that. And I know that, when I reached out to you through LinkedIn, I wanted to talk to you about equity, AI, and education. And that was ultimately going to be the primary topic of our discussion today. Equity is super important to you. Where do you think we're failing right now and how we can do better in the education system?
Oh, where to begin? The funding models, I think, are a big piece of the problem. When we look at public education, I actually, in my early career, did a stint of several years as a public high school teacher. I wanted to kind of get out into like all the way down in the thick of it, like what is the lived experience of our teachers, the overwork, the underpay, all of the things that have created this big attrition of teachers. I think is a problem, but a lot of that has to do with funding mechanisms, not being able to keep up with the pace of what it takes to keep highly qualified professionals in a classroom. So I think that's a very big piece of it, making sure that we start to really value what needs to be valued, and not put more money into a football budget than we put into making sure that the teachers who are working with students, and to really cap it at 28 kids in a class or 30 at the most. I was at a public high school for a couple of years, right outside of Washington, D.C., where they gave me 38 kids in a couple of those
Oh, wow.
classes. It was impossible. And a lot of them were neurodivergent, it was blended learning. It was like bringing in other teachers, and they were trying to spackle together something that seemed like it made sense on paper, but in the trenches did not make sense. So when I approach this as an entrepreneur and building technologies and founding companies, I'm looking at it through the lens of, I'm also a mom of three. So I've seen it from the parent view, from the student view, from the teacher view, from the administrator view, and then from the founder of technologies perspective as well. And how hard it is to permeate these quote unquote markets when you're trying to get a product out into, and this is where Rita and her partner Kevin Custer, who's a great friend and ally of mine, they invested in my second company, which was called Gate. Those guys, they know more than anybody how impossible it is to try to bring a for-profit company into a school district. But at the end of the day, this has got to be about the kids. This is
For
not
sure.
about profit. This is not about politics. If this isn't about students, I'm out. I don't even care. It's got to be about the kids, and they are hurting. They don't know how to be ready for their careers. They're in student debt, 1.8 trillion. We have to do better.
For sure. And today I saw, and I'm maybe I'm too transparent to a flaw. I moved to the United States 7 years ago, right? So I always tell everybody that I don't have an opinion, even though my opinion is voiced very loudly. But I guess I don't have a vote, but I do have an opinion. And when I came here, my opinion was definitely one side over the other. Um, but when COVID hit, our whole world, no matter what your thoughts were, changed dramatically. And what I was learning was that we couldn't communicate in America, and we didn't know how to talk to somebody that we necessarily didn't agree with. And when the opportunity came for me to get into the education technology space because of needs that my family had, I, I truly like broke it down to, my opinion was that it's broken because we're not providing enough early education resources to help people understand the difference between somebody's opinion, uh, versus our own. But I broke it into literacy and that being the fundamental thing that we need to focus on. And from there, we can continue to build up. That was my journey into it. But after, diving in and seeing where these budgets are going, I would, the reason I'm saying this is because I would have been 100% against the payback of tuitions. I would have told you that until I dove into this space. And then hearing from my own staff, Dr. Carlton, how his loan was repaid, it really started striking home with me. I'm like, we're not just repaying anybody's tuition. We're focused on educators, primary people that really drive our economy and help grow our students and our children population. So I've started to learn and see the other side of why these things are taking place. Um, I guess I say that because these opportunities need to be across all avenues, not just, from a political or not from that high level standpoint, but investing deeper into inner city communities. Um, and I guess where I'm going with that is that a lot of barriers have been put up because people want to see nonprofits go into schools over for profits. I think this was probably something that you were learning with your startup as well. How
Mhm.
important do you think for profit, let me reword that, how important or how impactful do you think for profits can be in the education space, even though they want to push it to the outside?
I love this question because I've been very frustrated for years with, as a primary example, the College Board, a nonprofit that is profitable to the nth degree. And feel free to check out my dissertation where you get 225 pages about me analyzing that and other little factoids that are part of the issue here, right? The nonprofits can be very profitable. They can own real estate. They can do all kinds of things. And sometimes for-profits have missions and visions that are much more aligned with what is in the highest good of a student. But the idea of you're this mercenary outsider who's just trying to come in and get money is kind of attached to that. I think just because of the linguistics of for-profit, nonprofit. Like there are some very unprofitable for-profits and very profitable nonprofits. So I think we got to start with the semantics, right? I have seen many, like you think about Canva, Blackboard, a lot of the LMS systems, like these are for-profit companies without which none of the other apps and architecture could be there that are really used in classrooms across the country today. There are some really great products that are for profit. I think of one of my mentors is Jessie Woolley Wilson, and she founded Dreambox, and she's their CEO, and she's just this powerful woman who is doing for-profit work that drives so much equitable access because she is able to build up the coffers in a way that she's able to then give back. But she's built a beautiful model where there is both. And I think the companies that tend to do best are the ones that have their hearts in the right place, like that. But that's not in every case. That's
I,
certainly not in every case.
I love the way you said that. When we started, we felt like credibility was going to be the first thing that we needed to be able to attempt to bring into the company. How do we make our company credible in this space? So we reached out to some of the biggest nonprofits in the world in the literacy space. And the first thing I said when we got involved is like, I will do this. We will donate our technology to you guys on one condition. I want to see us move the needle. And that was 2 years ago. To this day, that nonprofit has deployed our technology 0 times.
Hmm.
I have flown across the world. I've spoken at their conferences for them. I've spoken to rooms full of educators in Oxford University, all out of my realm to try and help move the needle. But these guys were 20-year veterans in the literacy space. They've been able to put our free technology in the hands of 0 people. Since starting, we've grown into like 87,000 subscribed users in the public school markets. So
Mhm.
I guess I point that out is because sometimes the mission, like you're saying, for profit companies is actually deeper than nonprofits, and you can get lost in that terminology. Um, One of the things that you and I connected on the first time that we talked is your work into foster care children and preparing them for college readiness. Talk to me about that. How'd you get into that space? I'm passionate. My grandma ran a foster home, but how'd you get involved in that?
Thank you. Well, I've just started a new nonprofit in the last 6 months, and we're so excited because we are deploying a blended learning process to help foster teens so they don't age out of the foster system without a plan. So we are building a career readiness, college readiness platform, which is literally underway right now. We're iterating. We've got the designers, we've got the tech team, we've got the curriculum designers, and it's my favorite part of the process. I love building the plane while it's flying. It's my favorite thing. So we're called American Access Institute. You can see us online, americanaccessinstitute.org. And the way I got into this space is actually through my mom. My mother
Oh,
was a
wow.
CASA, and CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates. These are professionals that are trained and vetted and that work in communities all across the country to help foster kids through the system by being a voice in court for the child. When my mom passed 2 years ago, sadly, I promised her that I was going to pick up the mantle. And I think she thought that meant that I was going to be a CASA, which I am. I immediately went and became a CASA, but I decided to go one step further and build the platform that I think all CASAs need, because CASAs are not college and career readiness specialists. And I can pour my knowledge and the knowledge of the team I'm bringing together into a technology so that the CASA or any other nonprofit working with those populations. Our first pilot is going to be with a home here in the Las Vegas area that is foster youth that have become pregnant, and these are young pregnant teenagers who need career readiness training, and that's our very first pilot. We're doing that this July. So that's how I got into it, and it's kind of a payback to a really great mom that I was blessed to have. But it's so intersects everything. I almost can see like kind of the fingerprints of God on top of it. That's what my mother would say. God has been guiding you, baby. Okay, mama, whatever we want to call that is great, because at the end of the day, if kids get helped, I'm here for it.
No, that's amazing. I kind of look at my journey, and I didn't grow up in foster care, but I did see my grandma make impact on, multiple lives through her life, and they grew with her. They were still coming around at 50, 60 years old, until my grandmother
Yeah.
passed away. So they you could just see the impact that these uh, these foster parents have on those kids, maybe when they feel like they've been given up on, and need it the most. One of the
Yeah.
areas that we moved in, and what I didn't understand was how many, kids in foster care, but also like kids in temporary housing, and what that whole school network looked like. I just didn't even know it existed. Schools for kids in temporary housing are like kids in the homeless school population. So there is a big need for people to participate in these areas. If somebody wanted to
Yeah.
get involved in that, how would you recommend somebody going out and getting involved like this?
There are a lot of sort of adjacent nonprofits. Like I'll tell you the second one that we're looking into. I'm touring with our board of directors next week. One in Vegas. I live in the Vegas area, and it's called Street Teens. And these are foster youth who ran away from their foster homes because of gosh knows what was going on in those situations. Sometimes you go from bad to worse as these kids move through the system. Very unlikely that teenagers get adopted out. Most people who want to adopt look for younger children. So these are really just kids who feel abandoned. So there's a lot of trauma-informed care and social emotional learning components to the way we're putting our curriculum together. I think that people need to decide which piece of those adjacent things you're a part of. Is it that you are somebody who could be a volunteer at a place like Street Teens here in Vegas, and it's a drop-in home. They can't live there. These are homeless kids, but they feed them, shower them, they give them showers, computer lab, access to blue jeans in all different sizes. Like they make sure they have their basic necessities. If you are interested in if you're a certified educator, I would say reach out to me. We're right now building out our regional managers. I've got 3 locations right now that are already kicking into action. One in Nashville, the one in Vegas, where we already had our regional manager in place, and I've got a call from a colleague of mine in Los Angeles who wants to start a regional program for what we're doing there. So I think we're going to pretty quickly build out. I'm only going to be working with state certified educators because I need them to have already gone through the background checks and to understand pedagogy and so forth. But to be able to take what we are creating and run with it and help a bunch of kids, like, yes, please.
Yeah. So I reached out to you through LinkedIn. I originally reached out because you were looking after Jason's communications, and then after reading on your background, I'm like, wait a minute. I think I need to talk to Pamela first, because she aligns with 100% with where we're at in education. Um, but networking, you talked on it, and you've talked on a couple locations, Las Vegas one. That's where I met Shaquille, and his foundation and his whole team, and Nashville, Tennessee, where I know another key couple of people that focus on children's education that I'd love to introduce you to when we get offline. But networking, how important is your network. It's one of the things that I love to talk to people about.
Jason made a comment after hiring me. And the truth is that about 2/3 of his org chart are people that I brought on board through my Rolodex. So he kind of joked with me. He said, Pamela, do you know what social capital is? I said, yeah, it's like a big part of my value that I bring, because although, I'm a communicator, and I write policy, and I help him with all, spoken, written, all of the things, everything on the website, all the things that are there. If I weren't I wouldn't have even met him. Okay. I met him at South by Southwest. I had been speaking at the GSV conference. He had been there. He had heard about me through other people, asked me to show him my technology. Like, there's all of that is networking. And I want to say something that's very gendered about that. As a female founder, I think there's a real you have to push through some cultural messaging that we have in this country as a woman, this idea that it's not feminine to network, or it's not ladylike to walk into a room and, like I had to raise money to have my technologies. I didn't just, pull that off a tree somewhere. So to get comfortable with, yes, I'm female, also show me the money, like to not feel like you have to demur, right? Like, just to be like, look, I'm bringing something valuable. It's solving this problem. Here's the pro forma cash flows. Here's the business plan. Here's all of this work I've done. And just pretend I'm a dude with a beard and a mustache, whatever you got to do to get past that part. So like, let's help kids. Like, that's where I'm at.
That's where you're at.
So I do.
When you said people are worried about women founders or women in an entrepreneurial position coming out of their femininity, do you think that comes from men that don't know how to sit in their masculinity?
Ooh, loaded question. I don't project onto men any assumption of what's what's because we're all marinating in the same ugly patriarchal cultural stew, right? We're all kind of soaking it up even when we're not aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know is the answer to that. I have no idea, but I do know that both men and women, like I have a lot of women in business who seek me out as a mentor, and I help them. And a lot of our conversations are exactly this, like how to ask for the raise, how to know your value, how do I walk into a room, how do I ask for money, how do I set my value, how do I dress, how do I, all the things, right? It's like, it takes time to get comfortable with kind of occupying a position of leadership, but it's not ego, it's not power tripping, and it's not trying to be a man. It's
No, for
just
sure.
knowing that you have something important to bring to the table, and like, move over, boys. Here I come. I sit
I
right
guess the
here.
reason I asked that question is because me and my wife had a conversation about this literally last night. But my wife's an entrepreneur. She has her own business. You know what I mean? So, touching on the things that I love about her is her ability to walk in a room and demand respect. You know what I mean? And she doesn't do it
Nice.
from any other way, but she comes in, very confident. And I admire that about her, and uh, some days I'm like, do you want to be an entrepreneur? Would you like to just stay at home? And, you know, I guess I asked her those questions just because I was old fashioned. I thought that, I was going to do this, but it just is empowering to see her go and strive in areas that she wants to, as it is to watch her be a mom, which she can do both. And she does both very well. We
Sure.
have a 2-year-old,
Oh,
and
wonderful.
she parents and works every day, all day long. And, originally we tried the nanny thing and they just never did it the way she wanted to. So she's just like, I'm just going to do it both. So this is like a very powerful human in my life, who I applaud every day. Um, Amazon best-selling author. Uh, I could go over accomplishment after accomplishment. I guess I ask on that because I've sat at a computer 100 times thinking I was going to write a book. You've wrote multiple.
Yeah, the books are nothing compared to dissertations. Wait till you take that on. That's the real
And
that's
just for
wrestling
everybody
the
listening, we
beast.
will post a link to that dissertation that you talked about
Sure, yeah,
earlier as
it's
well.
free online, and I offered that without, I want people to. It's called the Axis of Access. So Axis with an X, Axis of Access, And that was analyzing presidential rhetoric about the American dream and about college access. So literally quantitative and qualitative analysis of how did this president talk about it, how did that president, and where do we need to go in the rhetoric, like the story that we're telling. Because I think a lot of the student debt that we've got these days is because we're telling a false story, and we need to
Yeah, I
tell a
like
more
that.
true story. So, but yeah, writing books is great. That little Amazon book was not much, but it was something that I was happy to see that it went to #1 in the education section for a period of weeks. And then you can say, Amazon bestselling, whatever. My second book is the one that has been more impactful. I hand that out at my live events. I give that to potential clients. It's a robust book called 4 Keys to College Admission Success. And that's written for the parents who are freaking out, because they always are as their kids are getting closer to 10th and 11th grade. So I offer that. And then, that book was written in 2015. So from 2015 to 2024, there's a whole lot and that's where really my leaning into policy, leaning into this doctorate, leaning into, okay, I can be a practitioner, but I also am somebody who thinks bigger than that. I think philosophically, I think structurally, and certainly in terms of the political mechanisms that are impacting these kids.
That's so far we've talked about, one being an best-selling author, starting 2 companies, being an educator. You've also been a TV personality. You've helped Jason with his campaign. Is there anything you haven't done that you want to yet?
There's a lot of things I don't do and I can't do. I'm lousy at golf. Don't invite me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could give you a very long list. I'm not big on calculus. I can't. If your kid grows up and needs a calc tutor, I am not that person. I'm joking. Listen, anything in the communications realm, like you mentioned, that I had been a TV personality in my 20s. I was I was on soap operas, and I used to hide that. I used to be embarrassed of it. Now I just think it's kind of this funny, kitschy little, like, what kind of factoid about me. But it is true that when I was growing up in a little town in Virginia, nobody was helping me figure out how to get to college. I got on a train, went to New York, ended up modeling, and then getting back-to-back roles on 3 different soap operas with contracts with ABC. So not everybody has that experience, but that's communications, right? I was early 20s playing little ingenues, wearing these little outfits and whatever it was, it was One Life to Live and All My Children and The Edge of Night. And I look back now and I just chuckle, because, you get to my age and it's all kind of just like, oh man, what a ride this has been. This has been a hoot. And I don't even know what the next 20, 30 years are going to be. So I'm here for it. But that was for real. And everybody's like, you got any video on that? And I'm like, yeah.
I do, whether I want to share it or not.
If you want to see the shoulder pads and the permed hair, it was the
Oh, wow.
80s. So it is fun to look back at that, but it's all communications. Working with Jason, also communications, storytelling, precision of language, ability to cut through the distraction of today and to say something that makes people sit up, pay attention, and take action. That's what communication needs to do. It needs to motivate the other person to do something different than they would have otherwise done. Otherwise, you may as well not even waste your breath.
You just mentioned storytelling there. We're both founders. We've both gone through raising capital. One of the things that I've learned to do better, but wasn't great at it, was storytelling. How many places, if you could tell a young founder, how important do you think storytelling plays in the role of your career, your future, and everything that you're going to do with it?
It's critical. It's critical. Listen, my undergrad at Columbia University was in literature and writing. And so I really chose to steep myself in all of the classics because I wanted to understand story arcs and character motivation. I wanted to understand, tropes and themes and the way that authors, all the many ways that authors, because everything doesn't have to be beginning, middle, end, think there are ways to interpret and reinterpret, and then syntactically, even with language or sentences, to play with that sequencing and to find the perfect word for the perfect thing that you want to say that's going to land in a certain way. Like I'm a nerd. I geek out on this stuff. I love etymology. When I was growing up, I had a dictionary with a flashlight by my bed, and I would read words and what were the Greek and Latin roots of those words. I mean, that was me at 8 years old. So I've always been this kind of person. And if you're trying to be a founder and you say, I don't read, like just go get a job. Like you're not going to be a founder if you're not somebody who loves, you have to love reading something, even if it's nonfiction, right? Like I love fiction and nonfiction,
Mhm.
but you have to know what's out there to be able to reinterpret it for what you're going to put in the world,
I'm
you
going to
know?
say that just a tiny bit different. You have to be thirsty for knowledge.
Yeah.
There, and the only
Cheers.
reason I want to say it differently is because I'm a non-reader. I can get by. Eliana gives me all these notes, and I'm like, "Hey, write them in like grade 1 reading level so I can understand them." Right. Um, so reading, and that is the fundamental of success, is being able to understand, comprehend, read, communicate, and that's what we build my company. Um, but thirsty for knowledge. That's like the key thing, to be thirsty for knowledge. So audiobooks are my best friends.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Yeah. And listen, some people, dyslexia and whatever
mhm.
it is. I've got a brother who's ADHD. He was never a big reader, but like what you just said, books on tape and watching documentaries and like whatever the mechanism is not the
Right.
point. But
And I knew that you and I would align on that, so I just wanted to like spell it out for the person that's like, "Oh my God, I hate reading." Like, it's
right.
not just the actual physical art of reading. It's the thirst for knowledge, however you want
Right.
to
I do
approach
think
that.
the only place where I would disagree is in terms of writing. I think that to become a strong writer, you need to be physically reading words on a page because the writing is a very specific skill set, different than speaking.
100%.
So yeah,
100%. And ask anybody in my company what my email skills are. Thank you, ChatGPT.
Uh-oh.
I know I know
Grammarly.
you. Yes,
Grammarly is your
Grammarly.
friend.
I have it on my phone. I use it every day. ChatGPT is replacing Grammarly on my phone, for sure. And the nice thing is that I have enough interviews online that when I say write it in the tone of Kyle Walgren, that it's actually pretty close. So that is interesting. It does help me
That's
tremendously.
scary. I haven't looked at that for myself. God
You
knows
need
what
to.
it'll do.
You need to. Because I was like, wow, like that's pretty close to how I would say something. Um,
Wow.
Pamela, I've had a blast talking with you. If anybody wanted to reach out, what's the best way to contact you?
Well, I'll give you my email with the nonprofit because that'll come straight to me, and that's PD, just my initials,
Hmm?
PD at AmericanAccessInstitute.org. And I would love to hear from folks who are interested in learning more about that. If anybody's looking for college admissions support for their high schoolers, I do still offer one-on-one mentorship services as an independent educational consultant, both at the undergrad and graduate level. I work with kids going into law school, going into medical school, but also going in for their bachelor degrees, help them through their essays, blah, blah, blah. Again, back to the writing, back to
Yep.
the, I'm that
Can't get
person.
around it. Yeah,
Um, yeah.
sorry, continue on.
I
Um,
was just going to say one of the funny things that when Jason and I started working together, and he said, do you have bandwidth to do this? I said, well, Jason, I said, if I can get these kids into Harvard and Yale, I can get you into the White House.
I still, we didn't even touch. There was one thing that I thought was like super exciting. Um, Jason was the only Democratic candidate to win a primary
Yep.
with a sitting president. I think that might be like the first time that's ever been done in history, if I'm not correct.
In
But it
about
was
40 years. Yeah.
okay. There you go. How exciting was that to know that you're on that side of history and know that
Yeah.
the message that Jason was telling, and maybe under different circumstances would have been absorbed differently, but just that accomplishment in his own means like, hey, Jason, you should probably try this again in 4 years.
Oh yeah, I really am encouraging him, and I hope he will run again in 28. I think that could be his year. That moment, it was interesting. We happened to be at the same conference in DC the day that happened, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and it was just like, oh my gosh, I won American Samoa, And so his phone was blowing up. He almost couldn't even do. He was supposed to be speaking at this event, and it's like I got CNN and out in the hall, and then I got this one and that one. So yeah, no, it's been really gratifying to see that the policies we, were able to think through together. And then for the, obviously it's all his ideas, but, for him to have somebody who's a bit more of like a wordsmith help him to craft that. And then that those websites and that the places where all these people, all the press releases, it's exciting to have been able to contribute on that. And, he sent me this little certificate that I put back here. It's so cute. I'll show you. It's it's kind of funny. Here you go. Thank you for contributing to democracy, Pamela Donnelly.
That's so awesome. I think
It was so sweet. That just came yesterday, and I was like, all right, I'll take it. I'll put it up next to my
so cool.
my
I think that
diplomas.
it's so important right now, just because I think there's a lot of things outdated. I believe that education or technology and education is so important right now because the education system's a little bit outdated. But I think that our political landscape is so outdated as well. And I think that by Jason winning, it tells that story that we are all ready for a newer way of doing things. So thank you for being a part of that. I really appreciate the efforts that you guys are making, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. I can't wait to have a conversation again. Thank you so much for your time. I'd love to continue on the conversation, but I promised I would keep it short. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Great to meet you. Great to see you. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.